The most infamous cults. Number 6. Heaven's Gate. In the 1970s, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles come to believe that they were the two witnesses referenced in chapter 11 of the Revelation in the Bible. They began preaching and gaining followers in California and Oregon with apocalyptic prophecies about how salvation would come in the form of a spaceship. Oh, and don't even worry, it only gets worse. There, their bodies would be kept in a cocoon where they would be cleansed of their humanness and transformed chemically and biologically into a next-level alien. Now, this really has me wondering how they recruited loyal members. Like, no chance you're just gonna have a random person come up to you and say, "You're gonna be a next-level alien and fly off to heaven," and not run off. Like, no. I'd be throwing a quick one and just running as far away from those two as possible. The group was known as Human Individual Metamorphosis, and then later Total Overcomers Anonymous, before becoming Heaven's Gate in the 1990s. Members had to live within the group, as well as give up their possessions and family. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that you had to be castrated for entry? They had up to 60 members at a time. The small but oddly large group, because who would ever want to join an alien prophecies cult, kept away from public most of its existence. Over the next few years, using the emerging popularity of the internet, they set up a website to help spread their message. In 1997, the whole Bop comet was approaching close to Earth, and rumors suggested that the UFO was following it. The group took this rumor very seriously and became convinced that their salvation would finally come. In March 1997, all 39 members were found dead from apparent suicide in preparation for their transition to heaven. I'm guessing the cocoons didn't work. Number 5. The Manson family. If you have ever touched the internet, you would probably have heard of Charles Manson. Being one of the most well-known names in cult history, Charles Manson was born in 1934 to a 16-year-old single mother. After his mother was imprisoned for armed robbery, he spent much of his young adult life in prison. When he was released in 1967, he moved to San Francisco and attracted a small but devout group of young people that became known as the Family. The Family was a group of around 100, who shared Manson's passion for an unconventional lifestyle and the use of LSD and the magic mushroom. Unlike most cults, the Manson family was not primarily religion-based. However, Charles Manson did preach Satanism as well as Scientology. Predicting a violent race war, he planned to have his Manson family hide out, then emerge to take control when it was over. Hey, Manson, when are we coming out? Shh, we must wait. To help instigate this race war, Manson ordered his followers to carry out murders, intending them to be blamed on African Americans. In 1969, the Manson family members killed several people in a Los Angeles house, including actress Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger. The next night, the Manson family members murdered 2 others. In both cases, the killers repeatedly stabbed the victims and wrote messages on the wall with their blood. 2 years later, he was arrested with other members of his family at his ranch for auto theft. It was later when Suzanne Atkins confessed to the involvement to the famous killings that Manson and his cohorts were sentenced to death, but got life in prison after California banned the death penalty. Manson died in prison in 2017. Around 1970, several members of the Manson family recorded music written by Charles Manson and actually released an album titled The Family Sings the Songs of Charles Manson. Number 4. The Branch Davidians. David Koresh was the leader of an apocalyptic Christian cult that would meet a violent and controversial end in Waco, Texas. After being expelled from the Seventh-day Adventist Church as a young man for telling the pastor he wanted to marry his 12-year-old daughter, David soon joined the Branch Davidians. While there, he shared a special relationship and affair with the leader, Louis Rodin, who named him as her successor. He claimed that he was the sign the Davidians were seeking, mentioning how God tasked him to bring the day of judgment. He started to collect many firearms in a preparation of the upcoming apocalypse, which led federal officers arriving to the cult base, Mount Carmel, in February 1993. Barricading themselves in and having no intention of letting the officers enter, the shooting began, leading to a 51-day standoff. Finally, the FBI was given a go, sending tear gas into the building. a fire broke out, ending the standoff. Most cult members were burnt to death, with a total death count of 76 Davidians, including Koresh himself. Only 4 federal agents were killed. Number 3. The Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple caught the attention of the public in October 1994, when 53 of its members in Switzerland and Quebec were murdered or committed suicide. When these tragic events were followed by 2 group suicides, the Solar Temple quickly became one of the most notorious and discussed cults. Joseph D. Mambro and Luke Jorrit founded the Order of the Solar Temple in Geneva in 1984. It was one of the many groups that had seen itself as a revival of the medieval Knight Templar. The Order of the Solar Temple was a doomsday cult, and in 1994 they believed the end was near and it was time to transit to the new planet. Residents of Sherry and Granges-sur-Sullivan, Switzerland, became aware of fires burning in the towns, one being in a farm and another in a chalet. By the next morning would be found the remains of 53 members of the Order of the Solar Temple. While at first it appeared to be a mass suicide, the bodies at Shiri told a slightly different tale. You see, if any of the cult members didn't want to comply with the rest, they would be strangled by having a plastic bag slid over their head, as well as 21 were administered sleeping pills before being shot to death. Remote controls that ignite the fire were found at the site of the deaths. You gotta give it to them. Having remote control igniters in 1994 is pretty impressive. A year later, on December 23rd of 1995, the bodies of another 16 members would be found in a burned out chalet in the Swiss Alps. The bodies were arranged in a star pattern with their feet towards the ashes of the fire. Number 2. Aum Shinrikyo. Formed in 1987 by Master Asahara Shoko, Aum Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult. Asahara had originally started a yoga school, but after a trip to India, which he achieved enlightenment in the Himalayas, he changed the name of the school to Aum Shinrikyo and began preaching about the end of the world in his yoga class. Like, imagine hitting the happy baby pose and bro tells you, yeah, the world's gonna end tomorrow. He gained many followers as he claimed to embody a god, and he secured significant financial donations. The group ended up becoming very malicious, and by 1995 the group had around 50,000 members, mostly being in Russia. By this time, Asahara had begun preparing for war and expected Aum Shinrikyo to take over the government. To deflect police attention away from the group's activities and instigate the violence he prophesied, Asahara orchestrated an attack in the Tokyo subway. On March 20th, 1995, 5 members of Aum Shinrikyo boarded the subway on different trains. When they arrived at Kasumigaseki, they placed a package wrapped in newspaper under their seats. They punctured the packages with the tips of their umbrellas and rushed off the train as the gas seeped out. They succeeded in killing 12 people and sickening 5,500. Authorities traced the attack to the group and arrested the leadership, largely dismantling the group. Asahara was executed in 2018 along with 6 other cult members. Number 1. The People's Temple. The charismatic cult leader, Jim Jones, was a preacher from the Pentecostal tradition. Although white, Jones attracted a large African American following because of his preaching style as well as his dedication to integration and racial equality. Jones began the People's Temple in the 1950s in Indianapolis. But after backlash from his views and a magazine on places to survive a nuclear holocaust, he moved his cult to Ukiah, California in 1965. In the next 5 years, the People's Temple's membership went from less than 100 to thousands, with thriving churches in San Francisco and Los Angeles. He would lure people in to join his cult by promising physical and mental healing services.
Bippity boppity halakazam.
Yeah.
Jones began building a commune called Jonestown in Guyana, 1977. In Jonestown, Jones became more protective and controlling. He urged members to live communally and pressured them to give their money and homes to the church. He began punishing those who had contact with the outsiders, including family members. Jones told parents how to punish their children. Eventually, he started publicly punishing children and adults himself, with verbal humiliation or a heavy wooden paddle. Jones's shift from being kind to controlling was so gradual that the members who were experiencing this oppressive culture were hardly aware of it. In November 1978, a U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan, convinced by former members and worried relatives of members in the cult, flew down to visit Jonestown to learn more about it. Several members sent him silent messages begging him to leave. Just before Ryan was about to board his plane, along with the cult members who wanted to escape, Jones's men arrived at the airship and killed the congressman as well as several others. Later that day, Jones convinced his congregation to kill themselves, as he believed that the end was near, by drinking a fruit drink, no, not actually Kool-Aid, filled with cyanide and tranquilizers. More than 900 people died, including 276 children.